Hey there, dreamers, and welcome back to Hafee Sleep. Whether you're curled up under the covers, sipping tea in your favorite chair, or just taking a deep breath in the middle of a busy day, I'm so glad you're here. Right now, wherever you are in the world and whenever you're listening, you're about to drift into a story older than your deepest dreams. Tonight, we're rewinding the clock. Way back. Forget counting sheep. We're talking 66 million years. We'll witness the end of giants, the terrifying moment Earth went dark, and the incredible quiet spark of life that flickered back. It's a tale of fire, ice, feathers, and the most unlikely comeback story the planet has ever seen. Spoiler alert, you might just look at the birds outside your window. Very differently tomorrow. Before we dive into the ancient silence, do me a favor. If this journey helps you unwind, if it sparks a little wonder, or just gives your mind a peaceful place to rest, hit that subscribe button. It helps Hafee Sleep grow and tells me you want more stories like this. Like a little virtual high five, always appreciated. And down in the comments, tell me two things. Where are you listening from right now? And is it day or night for you? It's always magical to picture our little Hafee Sleep community scattered across the globe sharing this moment. Your comments make my day. All right, let's dim the lights. Find your comfiest spot. Take a slow, deep breath in and out. Good. Picture the ground beneath you, not as it is now, but as it was. A world about to change forever. The reign of the giants is ending. But from the ashes, imagine, if you will, a world where the ground trembles not from earthquakes, but from footsteps. Where the sky darkens not from storm clouds, but from the leathery wings of creatures as large as small planes. This wasn't a fantasy movie or a fever dream. This was Earth, about 230 million years ago. Dinosaurs, those magnificent, bizarre, and utterly captivating giants, were the undisputed rulers of the planet. They stomped, soared, and swam across continents for an almost unimaginable span of time. Over 170 million years. To put that in perspective, if you stacked every human lifetime end to end, you'd need about 1 million of them just to fill the Cretaceous period alone. And then, poof, gone, vanished, leaving behind nothing but bones, a layer of extraterrestrial dust, and a mystery that's taken us centuries to unravel. How did these incredible beasts rise to such dominance? What was life like in their shadow? And what, in the end, punched their ticket to oblivion? Buckle up. We're about to take a ride through the ultimate saga of triumph, tragedy, and cosmic bad luck. Our story starts long before the first dinosaur even twitched a toe claw. Picture Earth around 252 million years ago, reeling from the worst day. Well, millennium it ever had. The Permian period was ending not with a whimper, but with a cataclysmic bang. It wasn't just a bad day. It was the planetary equivalent of your house burning down, flooding, getting hit by a tornado, and having your entire neighborhood sink into a toxic swamp, all while someone set off a dirty bomb for nearly 2 million years. This was the grand finale of the Permian period, and scientists don't call it the Great Dying for kicks. They call it that because it was the single most catastrophic event in the history of complex life on Earth. Think about it. Over 90% of everything in the oceans and about 70% of everything on land just gone. Poof. Erased. It makes the dinosaur extinction look like a minor hiccup in comparison. So, What turned our vibrant planet into a post-apocalyptic wasteland? Grab a comfy seat and maybe a stress ball. We're diving into the nightmare. The villain wasn't an asteroid this time. No, this horror show was homegrown. Deep beneath what is now Siberia, a colossal bubbling pool of magma the size of Australia was getting restless. We're talking about a geological monster known as the Siberian Traps. Imagine not just one volcano, but thousands upon thousands of them erupting simultaneously across millions of square miles. A continental-scale volcanic rage. This wasn't the picturesque cone of Mount Fuji spewing ash clouds. This was unimaginable violence. Giant fissures ripped open the Earth's crust, vomiting out enough lava over hundreds of thousands of years to bury the entire United States under a mile-thick layer of molten rock. Seriously, the volume of lava produced could cover the whole planet knee-deep. The ground itself was melting. The heat radiating from this inferno would have roasted life for hundreds of miles around instantly. But the real killers were the invisible gases pumped into the atmosphere like a runaway industrial accident. First came the carbon dioxide, CO2. Mountains of it. We complain today about rising CO2 levels measured in parts per million. The Siberian Traps likely blasted out trillions of tons. Think about adding the exhaust fumes of every car, plane, factory, and cow that's ever existed, multiplied by 1,000,000, and dumped into the sky in a geological blink. This triggered a runaway greenhouse effect. Global average temperatures might have soared by a staggering 10 degrees Celsius, 18 degrees Fahrenheit, or more. Imagine stepping outside into an average summer day that felt like Death Valley on its worst day, everywhere, even near the poles. Oceans warmed dramatically, becoming sluggish bathtubs devoid of vital oxygen. Marine life that needed cool, oxygen-rich water suffocated en masse. Coral reefs obliterated. Entire ecosystems built over millions of years collapsed like sandcastles at high tide. But wait, there's more. The volcanoes also spewed enormous amounts of sulfur dioxide, SO2. When SO2 mixes with water vapor in the atmosphere, it forms sulfuric acid. So picture this. Not only was the planet baking, but it was also being drenched in acid rain. Not gentle vinegar sprinkles, but rain as corrosive as battery acid. It poisoned lakes and rivers, stripping forests bare, leaching nutrients from the soil, and dissolving the shells and skeletons of countless creatures. The land became a scorched, poisoned desert. The skies would have been perpetually choked with ash and toxic smog, blocking sunlight and plunging parts of the world into a gloomy twilight, even as the heat remained oppressive. It was a toxic cocktail of baking, suffocating, and dissolving. The oceans didn't escape. As CO2 dissolved into seawater, it turned the oceans acidic. Imagine pouring vast amounts of soda water into the sea. For creatures building shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate, like clams, snails, corals, and crucial plankton, it was like trying to build your house out of chalk in a rainstorm. Their shells dissolved faster than they could form them. The base of the entire marine food web crumbled. On top of that, the warming surface waters prevented oxygen from mixing down to deeper levels. Vast stretches of the ocean floor became dead zones, where only bacteria that thrived in poison, like those that produce rotten egg-smelling hydrogen sulfide, could survive. These hydrogen sulfide bubbles rising from the depths would have further poisoned the air and water near the surface. It was a planet-wide cascade failure. So who did survive this gauntlet of fire, acid, poison, and suffocation? The ultimate Permian survivors were a motley crew of the tough, the small, the burrowing, and the adaptable. Think less majestic giants, more like the cockroaches and rats of their time, though actual cockroaches did pretty well too. In the oceans, a few hardy types of clams and snails that could tolerate acidic or low oxygen conditions clung on. Some fish that weren't too picky about their water quality squeaked through. On land, the survivors were even more humble. Small, scurrying creatures like Lystrasaurus, a pig-sized, beaked, burrowing herbivore that looked like a grumpy, hairless wombat crossed with a turtle, suddenly became incredibly common. Why? Because it could dig. Burrowing underground offered escape from the searing heat, acid rain, and toxic air at the surface. It could likely eat tough, fibrous roots or decaying plant matter when lush greenery vanished. Other survivors included small lizard-like reptiles and the ancestors of mammals. Tiny, shrew-like critters that lived in tunnels or dense undergrowth, perhaps coming out only at night when it was cooler, nibbling on insects, seeds, or whatever scraps they could find. They were the ultimate generalists, not needing much food or specific conditions. And then, stillness. The Siberian traps finally, exhaustedly, stopped erupting. But the damage was done. The Permian period was over, leaving behind a planet that looked like it had been put through a cosmic washing machine set to destroy. The air, though clearing slowly, was still thick with lingering CO2, keeping temperatures oven-like. The oceans were warm, acidic, and largely lifeless deserts. Vast stretches of land were barren, scarred rock, or shifting dunes of volcanic ash. What plants remained were tough ferns, scrubby horsetails, and maybe a few hardy conifers clinging to less devastated areas. The silence must have been deafening. The colossal roars, the rustling of giant forests, the splashing of teeming seas, all replaced by the whistle of the wind over desolate plains and the occasional skittering of small survivors in the rubble. This was the dawn of the Triassic period, roughly 251 million years ago. Earth wasn't just recovering, it was starting over. It was a gritty, harsh, post-apocalyptic world where every scrap of life was precious and the rules were being rewritten. Enter the underdogs. Among the survivors picking through the ruins were unassuming reptiles called archosaurs. The name means ruling lizards, which sounds awfully grand for what they were at this point. Imagine them as the scrappy, resourceful survivors in a disaster movie, not the muscle-bound heroes. Picture something roughly the size of a large house cat or a medium dog, scuttling on four legs close to the ground. Their build was streamlined, efficient. They probably looked a bit like a cross between a slim crocodile and a leggy lizard. Long tails for balance, sharp teeth suggesting a meaty diet, insects, small animals, maybe carrion, and possibly covered in tough, pebbly scales rather than the smooth skin of later dinosaurs. They weren't the biggest, the strongest, or the flashiest creatures around. In fact, they were likely scurrying around the ankles of the few remaining large, lumbering holdovers from the Permian world. Creatures like Dicynodonts, relatives of Lystrasaurus but bigger, or bulky, slow-moving, mammal-like reptiles. These bigger beasts were the fading aristocracy, relics of a bygone age struggling in the harsh, new Triassic reality. So, what made these humble archosaurs special? Why were they poised for greatness while others faltered? It all boiled down to efficiency. A suite of clever biological adaptations that gave them the edge in a world that was hot, arid, and often low on oxygen. Think of them as nature's first fuel-efficient hybrids, the breathing champions. This is arguably their biggest secret weapon. While many reptiles and the mammal-like beasts relied on a relatively simple bellows-like lung system, archosaurs evolved a more sophisticated setup, Their lungs were likely unidirectional. Here's the cool part. Instead of air sloshing in and out of the same tubes like a tide, which leaves some stale air behind, archosaur lungs might have worked more like a bird's, with air flowing through them in one direction, constantly refreshed, thanks to a system of air sacs. Think of it like a high-efficiency furnace versus an old fireplace. This meant they could extract oxygen from the thin, often polluted Triassic air far more effectively than their competitors. While others might have been left panting and sluggish in the heat, archosaurs could stay active, hunt, and evade predators with better stamina. It's like having a turbocharger for their metabolism, keeping their cool or warm. The Triassic climate was mostly hot and dry, with extreme temperature swings. Archosaurs might have had an early trick for managing this: primitive feathers or fuzz. We're not talking about flight feathers here, but simple hair-like filaments called proto-feathers, possibly covering parts of their bodies. Think fuzzy chicks or kiwi birds. This fuzz could have served as insulation. On cold nights, yes, deserts get cold, it would trap body heat. During the scorching days, it could provide shade for the skin or even help wick away sweat if they sweated. This adaptability gave them an edge over scaly reptiles that might overheat faster, or mammals that struggled to cool down efficiently. They weren't fully warm-blooded like modern birds or mammals yet, but they were likely more active and adaptable to temperature changes than typical reptiles, perhaps mesotherms, somewhere in between. Built for speed and smarts? Their skeleton also showed signs of efficiency. Their legs were positioned more directly under their bodies compared to the splayed limbs of many other reptiles. This upright-ish posture made them better runners, crucial for chasing prey or escaping the few remaining large predators. There's also tantalizing evidence that some early archosaurs had slightly larger brains relative to their body size compared to their contemporaries. This doesn't mean they were plotting world domination, but perhaps they were a bit more alert, a bit better at problem solving, like figuring out where to find water or how to ambush that juicy beetle hiding under a rock. Life in the early Triassic was brutal. Resources were scarce. Water holes were oases of life and death. Archosaurs weren't instantly the kings. They were survivors, opportunists. They likely filled various niches. Some might have been insectivores, snapping up beetles and grubs in the sparse undergrowth. Others might have been small carnivores or scavengers, feeding on the abundant carcasses or hunting the plentiful Lystrasaurus and other small survivors. They shared this harsh world with the ancestors of turtles, lizards, frogs, and those persistent little mammal relatives. Competition was fierce, but the archosaurs had the physiological toolkit to endure the extremes. Imagine the scene: a dusty, sun-baked floodplain under a hazy, orange-tinged sky. The air smells faintly of sulfur and dust. A few tough ferns struggle near a muddy waterhole. A bulky Dicynodont lumbers down for a drink, slow and heavy. Suddenly, a small, agile shape darts from behind a boulder. An early archosaur. It's not attacking the giant. It's far too small. Maybe it's snapping at insects disturbed by the larger animal's footsteps. Or perhaps it's eyeing a smaller, injured creature nearby. It moves with a quick, efficient gait, breathing steadily despite the heat. It's alert, scanning its surroundings. It represents the future, but right now, it's just focused on surviving the day, exploiting the harsh landscape in ways the fading giants couldn't. It was biding its time, honing its adaptations in the crucible of a broken world. The stage was set, the players were in place, but the main act, the the rise of the true dinosaurs was still millions of years in the future. Earth was taking its first shaky breaths after the Great Dying, and the archosaurs were learning to breathe deeper than anyone else. So, picture Earth finally catching its breath after the Great Dying. The Triassic period is in full swing, about 230 million years ago. Our scrappy archosaur underdogs are doing all right for themselves. They've diversified. Some look more like crocodiles lurking in rivers. Others are getting faster, more agile on land, and a few quirky branches are experimenting with new body plans. But the planet itself? It's basically one giant snuggled-up landmass called Pangaea. Imagine all the continents you know: North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, smooshed together like a colossal, unfinished jigsaw puzzle. You could literally walk from the icy fringes near the South Pole all the way up to the steamy, swampy equator near the North Pole, without so much as dipping your toe in an ocean. It was epic, but also kind of monotonous. Huge deserts stretched across the interior because moisture from the single giant ocean, Panthalassa, the all-ocean, struggled to reach the heart of the supercontinent. Seasons were extreme. Life, while recovering, was still finding its feet in this vast, connected world. Then Earth got restless. Tectonic plates, those gigantic slabs of rock floating on the planet's molten mantle, started to grumble. The immense pressure building under Pangaea became too much. It was like an overstuffed beanbag chair finally giving way at the seams. Around 200 million years ago, the supercontinent began the slow-motion, multi-million-year process of ripping itself apart. This wasn't a tidy separation. It was a messy, volcanic divorce. Massive fissures, thousands of miles long, tore through the crust. Think less like a zipper opening smoothly, more like the crust cracking like an eggshell under pressure. And through these cracks surged unimaginable amounts of molten rock. Lava. We're not talking about a few picturesque volcanoes dotting the landscape. This was flood basalt volcanism on a continental scale, centered primarily in an area that would become the Atlantic Ocean, known as the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, or CAMP. It was as if the planet was bleeding lava across millions of square miles. The eruptions weren't necessarily constant Mount St. Helens-style explosions. Often it was more like colossal, slow-motion bleeding of the Earth, with lava oozing out of gigantic cracks, covering vast areas in layer upon layer of molten rock that cooled into dark basalt plains. But the scale was mind-boggling, lasting for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. This geological redecorating project had brutal side effects. The atmosphere got sick. All that erupting lava didn't just bring rock, it pumped out staggering amounts of greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, CO2, and sulfur dioxide, SO2. We're talking trillions of tons. Imagine every car, factory, plane, and cow exhaust since the Industrial Revolution multiplied by 1,000 and dumped into the sky in a geological heartbeat. This caused a runaway greenhouse effect. Global temperatures skyrocketed. Estimates suggest jumps of 3 to 6 degrees Celsius, 5 to 11 degrees Fahrenheit, or more. The planet started sweating profusely. Acid rain. Apocalypse. That SO2 mixed with water vapor in the atmosphere, creating sulfuric acid. The skies opened up, not with refreshing rain, but with downpours as corrosive as battery acid. This acid rain poisoned lakes and rivers, stripped forests bare, dissolved the shells of freshwater creatures, and leached vital nutrients from the soil. Imagine walking outside and the rain actually stinging your skin and killing the plants around you. Ocean acidification. Just like during the Permian extinction, massive amounts of CO2 dissolved into the oceans, turning them more acidic. For marine creatures building shells from calcium carbonate, corals, clams, snails, crucial plankton, it became like trying to build a sandcastle as the tide comes in. Their shells dissolved faster than they could make them. The foundation of the marine food web began to crumble. Hypoxia. Warmer water holds less oxygen. The superheated oceans became stratified. Oxygen-rich surface water didn't mix well with deeper layers. Vast areas of the ocean floor became suffocating, toxic dead zones, devoid of oxygen and filled with hydrogen sulfide-producing bacteria. The stench of rotten eggs would have been pervasive near coastlines. This toxic cocktail, baking heat, acid showers, poisoned seas, and suffocating oceans, triggered another catastrophic event, the end Triassic mass extinction, roughly 201 million years ago. It wasn't quite as bad as the Permian Great Dying, but it still wiped out a staggering 96% of all species on the planet. Who were the primary victims? The big and slow. Large, slow-moving herbivores, like the last of the big, lumbering, mammal-like reptiles, Decinodonts, Traversodonts, that had survived the Permian, couldn't cope. They needed vast amounts of specific plants that were dying off, couldn't move fast enough to find new food or escape the changing conditions, and likely suffered from heat stress. Specialized predators. Large predators that relied on hunting these big herbivores found themselves without a menu. They were like gourmet restaurants, suddenly facing a global shortage of their signature dish. Marine masters. Giant marine reptiles, bizarre armored fish, and entire groups of coral and shell-building creatures were decimated by the acidification, oxygen loss, and collapse of their food chains. Reef systems collapsed globally. Cruelty to croc cousins. Ironically, many groups of archosaurs themselves got hammered. Those early crocodile-like archosaurs and other large Triassic reptiles, like the heavily armored Etosaurs or the predatory Rauisuchians, that dominated landscapes before the extinction largely vanished. They were victims of their own size, specialization, or inability to handle the rapid climate shifts. It was another planetary reset button. The Earth, once again, was left reeling, its ecosystems shattered. But amidst the smoke, acid rain, and general misery, who were the survivors? Who slipped through the cracks of this latest apocalypse? Enter the dinosaurs, finally, officially. Remember those quirky, experimental branches of the archosaur family tree? The ones that weren't becoming crocodiles? These were the dinosaurs. And the end Triassic extinction was their golden ticket. They weren't the giants we picture yet. Think more along the lines of scrappy, feathered, probably opportunists, perfectly suited for the chaotic post-apocalyptic world. Meet the early crew. Nyasasaurus parringtoni, found in what is now Tanzania, dating to about 243 million years ago. Still Triassic. This might be the oldest dinosaur, or at least a very close cousin. Picture it, about the size of a large house cat or a small Labrador retriever puppy, walking on two legs. Not exactly terrifying, but revolutionary in its posture. Eoraptor lunensis, from Argentina, about 230 million years ago. Slightly bigger, maybe Labrador retriever-sized. A light-built, bipedal little predator with different types of teeth. Some sharp for meat, others leaf-shaped for plants. This suggests it might have been an omnivore, a crucial advantage when specific food sources are scarce. Imagine a fast, feathered, chicken-sized creature with sharp claws and teeth, dashing through the undergrowth. Herrerasaurus ishigualastensis. Also Argentina, slightly later, bigger still, maybe 3 to 4 meters long and weighing as much as a human, a dedicated predator with powerful legs, sharp, serrated teeth, and grasping hands. This guy was starting to look like the classic meat-eating dinosaur blueprint. The secret sauce: why dinosaurs thrived in chaos. Posture is everything, the leg advantage. Forget the sprawling, lizard-like posture of their crocodile cousins or many extinct reptiles. Early dinosaurs had legs that were tucked directly underneath their bodies, like pillars holding up a building. This is called an upright posture, or fully erect gait. Think of a chicken or an ostrich walking, legs straight, body held high. This is hugely efficient. Energy saver. It takes far less energy to hold their bodies up and move. No more dragging their bellies or pushing sideways against gravity. It's like switching from walking through deep mud to walking on a paved road. Speed demons. That upright posture allowed for longer strides and faster running, crucial for chasing scarce prey, escaping the lingering large predators, or quickly moving between patchy food sources in the devastated landscape. A Herrerasaurus could likely outrun most other animals its size. Stamina kings. Efficient movement meant they could cover more ground without tiring, searching for food or water over wider areas, a major plus in a fragmented, resource-poor world. Lightweight champions. Their bones weren't just positioned well, they were often hollow or air-filled. Pneumatic, especially in later giants, but the trend started early. This made their skeletons incredibly light for their size. Imagine building a skyscraper out of steel girders versus lightweight, strong alloys. The dinosaur skeleton was the alloy. Less weight to carry meant less energy needed to move, jump, or run. It also potentially allowed for larger sizes later on without collapsing under their own weight. Metabolic mysteries. Warm-blooded? Maybe. This is a hot topic. Were early dinosaurs truly warm-blooded, endothermic like birds and mammals, cold-blooded, ectothermic like lizards, or something in between, mesothermic? The evidence leans towards them being more active than typical reptiles. Bone structure. Microscopic analysis of their bones often shows fast growth patterns similar to mammals and birds, suggesting a higher metabolism. Feathers, fuzz. Many early dinosaurs and their close relatives, like pterosaurs, likely had insulating proto-feathers, simple fuzzy filaments covering their bodies. Why have insulation if you don't generate your own body heat? It strongly suggests they were at least trying to be warm-blooded, or were already partially there. This insulation would keep them warm at night or in cooler periods, allowing them to be active when cold-blooded competitors were sluggish. Think of a lizard needing to bask in the sun for an hour before it can move fast, versus a fuzzy Eoraptor scampering around at dawn, ready to go. The activity advantage. Whether fully warm-blooded or just highly active ectotherms, they could sustain activity for longer periods. They could hunt or forage effectively during cooler parts of the day, or in seasons when other reptiles slowed down. In the unpredictable, stressful post-extinction world, constant readiness was key. Lung power, the hidden turbo. They inherited those amazing archosaur lungs. Remember the unidirectional airflow system? Like a high-efficiency furnace? This allowed them to extract oxygen from the thin Triassic-Jurassic air, far better than many other animals. More oxygen means more energy for running, growing, and reproducing. In a world potentially stressed by volcanic gases and heat, which can lower oxygen availability, this was a massive physiological advantage. Versatility is key. Many early dinosaurs, like Eoraptor, appear to have been omnivores. They weren't picky eaters. When the specific plants their herbivorous competitors relied on vanished, or the large prey their predatory competitors needed died out, early dinosaurs could switch diets. Insects, small animals, carrion, seeds, roots, young shoots, whatever was available. Being a generalist is a fantastic survival strategy during a mass extinction when specialized niches collapse. The Jurassic dawns, a world remade for dinosaurs. As the volcanic fury of the end Triassic extinction finally subsided, a new chapter began, the one Jurassic period. Starting about 201 million years ago, and Earth, freshly redecorated, presented dinosaurs with a gift-wrapped planet. The breakup of Pangaea wasn't just destruction, it was creation. As the continents slowly drifted apart, something magical happened. New coastlines. Think about it. When one giant continent splits, the edges that were once snugly tucked together become exposed. The single giant Panthalassa Ocean now rushed into the gaps between the separating landmasses. Vast, shallow seas formed over what had been dry continental interiors. Coastlines, with their incredibly rich mix of nutrients, sunlight, and varied habitats, beaches, lagoons, estuaries, marshes, exploded in length. More coastline meant more places for life to boom. This had a cascading effect. Climate makeover. The giant arid interior deserts of Pangaea were broken up by these new seaways. Moisture from the oceans could now penetrate much further inland. The global climate became significantly wetter and more moderate. While still generally warmer than today, the extreme desert belts shrank dramatically. Plant paradise. Rainfall increased. The acid-ravaged soils began to recover, and the plant world went nuts. Giant ferns unfurled in dense thickets. Cycads, resembling stout palm trees with tough palm-like leaves, formed groves. Horsetails grew to the size of small trees, and towering conifers, ancestors of pines, redwoods, and monkey puzzles, created the first true forests on a global scale. Imagine landscapes dripping with green, from low, lush fern meadows to dense, dark conifer woodlands towering overhead. Food, glorious plant food, was suddenly abundant everywhere. Habitat, explosion. The splitting continents created isolated landmasses. Shallow seas created island chains and vast continental shelves. Mountains rose along the rifting edges. This wasn't just more habitat. It was a dizzying array of different habitats. Coastal swamps, river floodplains, dense forests, open woodlands, arid scrublands, highlands. Diversity thrives on isolation and variety. Different dinosaur groups could evolve in different directions on separate continents without directly competing. Dinosaurs seized the day and the night and the ecosystem. With the competition largely wiped out, the climate ideal, and food plentiful, dinosaurs didn't just recover. They underwent an explosive evolutionary radiation. They diversified into an incredible array of shapes, sizes, and lifestyles, filling almost every available niche on land. It was like they won the evolutionary lottery and invested it all in diversification. The long-necked wonders, sauropods. This is where things get truly mind-bending. Dinosaurs like Volcanodon and Brachiosaurus in the early Jurassic were already big, elephant-sized or larger, but they were just the opening act. Sauropods figured out how to become the largest land animals ever to walk the earth. Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, names that evoke sheer scale. How did something the size of a house, weighing 30, 40, 50, even 70 tons, patagodaton, even function, let alone thrive? It wasn't magic, it was evolutionary genius. 1. The lung power multiplier. They inherited and supercharged the archosaur dinosaur lung system. Sauropods likely had a complex system of air sacs invading their bones, making them lighter, and connected to their lungs, creating a super-efficient, high-volume airflow system. Think of it like having multiple turbochargers. They needed this to oxygenate their massive bodies. A human-sized chunk of sauropod would have needed way more oxygen than a human. Their lungs were probably located high up near their shoulders, and the air sacs extended throughout their huge necks and torsos. This system allowed them to breathe in massive quantities of air and extract oxygen incredibly efficiently. Without this, they would have suffocated under their own bulk. 2. Live fast, grow massive. Forget slow and steady. Sauropod bones reveal astonishing growth rings like trees, showing they grew incredibly fast. They weren't just big, they got big quickly. A sauropod hatchling, maybe the size of a small dog, could balloon to several tons within just a few years, reaching near adult size in a decade or two. They were essentially perpetual teenagers with monstrous appetites. This rapid growth was crucial. It minimized the time they were vulnerable as small juveniles and allowed them to reach their colossal, relatively predator-proof sizes quickly. Imagine a baby growing to the size of a bus by its 10th birthday. 3. The low-energy colossus, metabolic efficiency. Here's the counterintuitive part. Despite their size, sauropods probably had relatively low metabolic rates compared to similar-sized mammals. Think of it less like a constantly roaring furnace, like an elephant, and more like a massive, well-insulated building with efficient heating. They weren't fully cold-blooded, but likely mesothermic, or had a unique sauropod metabolism. Their sheer size created thermal inertia. They heated up and cooled down very slowly, helping maintain a stable internal temperature without burning energy like crazy. Combined with their efficient lungs and potentially eating highly nutritious but low-maintenance food, like conifer needles, which are tough but energy-rich, they didn't need to consume as much food per pound as a similar-sized elephant or whale. An elephant might spend 18 hours a day eating. A sauropod, relatively speaking, could get by with less constant gorging. They were the ultimate in efficient gigantism. The eating machines. And eat they did. Their long necks were biological cranes, allowing them to browse treetops over a vast area without moving their enormous bodies much. Their peg-like or pencil-like teeth were perfect for stripping leaves and needles off branches. They didn't chew much. They likely swallowed vegetation whole, letting massive stomachs and swallowed stones called gastroliths do the grinding work later. A herd of sauropods moving through a forest would have been like a living combine harvester, stripping entire stands of trees bare. But thanks to the lush Jurassic world, the forests grew back fast enough to support them. The sauropods were the headline act, but the Jurassic stage was packed. Armored dinosaurs like Stegosaurus, with its iconic plates and spiked tail, Thagomizer, evolved to deter predators. Early bird-like dinosaurs, Anchiornis, Archaeopteryx, experimented with feathers and flight among the trees. Fierce predators like Allosaurus, the lion of the Jurassic, and the horned Ceratosaurus kept the herbivore populations in check. Tiny mammals still scurried in the shadows, and pterosaurs ruled the skies. Life had not just rebounded, it had exploded into a vibrant, noisy, dynamic world, dominated by creatures whose unique adaptations, upright posture, efficient breathing, potential warmth, rapid growth, and metabolic efficiency allowed them to seize the opportunity created by Earth's violent redecorating and turn the Jurassic into their undisputed golden age. The reign of the dinosaurs was well and truly underway, setting the stage for the even more spectacular Cretaceous to come. But it wasn't all peaceful grazing. The Jurassic also birthed the predators. Allosaurus, with steak-knife teeth, and Ceratosaurus, sporting a nose horn like a misplaced dagger, turned forests into hunting grounds 16. And above it all, pterosaurs, flying reptiles, not dinosaurs, ruled the skies. Yet dinosaurs were already innovating. Small, feathered theropods, the group including T-Rex, started experimenting with gliding. These were the ancestors of birds, though nobody back then would have guessed these flappy little creatures would inherit the earth. Life pulsed huge and loud. Sauropods moved in thunderous herds, their footsteps like earthquakes, snapping trees like twigs. Armored stegosaurs clanked around, swinging spiked tails, and underfoot, tiny fuzzy mammals scurried in the undergrowth, mostly just trying not to get squashed. They were the janitors of the Mesozoic, nibbling insects and plants, utterly overshadowed. Picture the Jurassic world, a land of giants under towering conifers, ruled by the thunderous steps of sauropods and the sharp cries of Allosaurus. But Earth, ever the restless renovator, wasn't done. As the Jurassic curtain fell about 145 million years ago, the Cretaceous period swaggered onto the stage, and it brought some serious upgrades. Forget a simple makeover. This was a full planetary reboot with a dazzling new feature pack installed. Remember Pangaea, that giant supercontinent? Its breakup, which started tentatively in the Jurassic, went into overdrive during the Cretaceous. It was like watching a slow-motion explosion of land masses. The Atlantic Ocean, once just a narrow rift, began to yawn wider, pushing North America away from Europe and Africa. South America finally started its solo career, drifting away from Africa. India, once snug against Antarctica, broke free and began its long, lonely sprint northwards towards its dramatic future collision with Asia. Australia and Antarctica were still cuddling, but their separation was on the horizon. This continental tango had profound effects. Shallow seas, take over. As continents drifted, vast, warm, shallow seas flooded over their margins. Imagine the Gulf of Mexico, but scaled up to continental proportions. The Western Interior Seaway split North America down the middle. You could have sailed from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico, right through the middle of what is now Denver. Similar epicontinental seas covered chunks of Europe, Africa, and Australia. These warm, sun-drenched, nutrient-rich waters became absolute nurseries for marine life. Coastlines became incredibly complex, mangroves flourished, and the sheer amount of shallow marine habitat exploded. Climate control. All that new ocean acted like a giant planetary thermostat. Water absorbs and releases heat slowly, so the Cretaceous world became generally warmer and much more stable than the Jurassic, especially in terms of temperature extremes between the equator and the poles. Palm trees might have grown near the Arctic Circle. While still warmer than today, the poles had distinct seasons, probably with winter snows, but nothing like the icy wastelands we know. This stable warmth fueled life like never before. Isolation breeds innovation. As continents drifted further apart, populations of plants and animals became isolated. Evolution loves isolation. Different dinosaur groups on different landmasses began evolving down unique paths. Dinosaurs in South America started looking distinct from their cousins in North America or Asia. This geographic separation was a giant petri dish for evolutionary experimentation. The floral fireworks, angiosperms explode onto the scene. If the continents rearrange the furniture, then plants completely redecorated. For over 200 million years, Earth's landscapes had been dominated by greens, browns, and muted tones. Conifers, ferns, cycads, and horsetails ruled. They were beautiful in their own ancient way. But imagine a world without flowers. No daisies, no roses, no cherry blossoms, no dandelions pushing through cracks in the sidewalk. Quiet. Then, sometime in the early Cretaceous, perhaps around 130 million years ago, a botanical revolution began. Angiosperms. Flowering plants made their debut. Think of them as the punk rockers of the plant world. They didn't just arrive, they exploded. Why flowers? The ultimate hack. Angiosperms had a secret weapon: co-evolution with animals. Instead of relying solely on the wind to spread their pollen, like conifers or grasses, they evolved bright colors, intoxicating scents, and sugary nectar to bribe insects into doing the job. Hey bee, free sugar over here. Oh, and could you take this pollen to the next flower while you're at it? Thanks. The insect frenzy. This bribe worked spectacularly. Insects, especially bees, which evolved alongside flowers, butterflies, moths, and even some beetles went nuts for this new resource. They evolved specialized mouthparts, body hairs for carrying pollen, and an incredible sense of smell to find the blooms. It was a mutual love affair. Insects got food, flowers got efficient, targeted pollination. Suddenly, landscapes weren't just green. They were splashed with vibrant yellows, reds, purples, blues, and whites. The air hummed with the buzz of pollinators and carried new, sweet fragrances. Fruit seeds, the takeaway service. But flowers were just the start. Angiosperms also mastered the art of the palm fruit. They wrapped their seeds in tasty, nutritious packages. Animals, including dinosaurs, would eat the fruit and later deposit the seeds somewhere else, complete with a handy fertilizer packet. Birds and mammals later perfected this seed-spreading service, but dinosaurs were among the first beneficiaries. This was light years more efficient than wind-blown seeds randomly landing somewhere suitable. Speed demons. Angiosperms grew fast, faster than conifers or ferns. They could colonize disturbed ground, like a riverbank after a flood, or a forest clearing after a giant sauropod knocked trees over, incredibly quickly. They were the opportunistic weeds that became the dominant forest, changing the menu and the landscape. This wasn't just pretty, it was a fundamental shift in the planet's dinner plate. New types of leaves, stems, fruits, and seeds became available. Tough, waxy leaves evolved to deter hungry mouths. Forests became more layered and complex, with dense understories of flowering shrubs beneath taller trees. Grass hadn't evolved yet. That's a story for after the dinosaurs. But the world was getting significantly leafier and more colorful at ground level. Dinosaurs embrace the bloom. Evolutionary buffet opens. Did dinosaurs just shrug at this floral revolution? Absolutely not. They dove in head first, evolving spectacularly to exploit the new resources. They weren't stuck in their Jurassic ways. They were dynamic, adaptable creatures. The cows of the Cretaceous meet the hadrosaurs. Forget the towering sauropods, though they were still around, especially in the south. The real masters of the new flowering world were the hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs. Susie Maidment wasn't kidding when she called them the cows of the Cretaceous. They were incredibly numerous and diverse, found almost everywhere. What made them so successful? The ultimate grinding machine, the dental battery. This is their superstar adaptation. Imagine a single jaw not holding 32 teeth like yours, but hundreds, even thousands. Hadrosaurs evolved dental batteries. Picture a massive, continuous grinding surface made up of to 60 rows of teeth stacked tightly together on each side of the jaw. As the top teeth wore down against the bottom ones, new teeth constantly erupted from below to replace them, like a biological conveyor belt of chewing power. It was like having a combine harvester in their mouths. This allowed them to efficiently pulverize incredibly tough vegetation, fibrous leaves, woody stems, and even the new, often tougher leaves of flowering plants. A Edmontosaurus could munch through a forest understory like a living lawnmower. Variety is the spice of life. Hadrosaurs weren't all the same. Some, like the famous Parasaurolophus, had elaborate hollow head crests that might have been used for trumpeting calls across Cretaceous valleys. Imagine the sound. Others, like Corythosaurus, had flatter, plate-like crests. Some had small crests, or none at all. This diversity suggests they specialized in slightly different foods, or lived in different habitats within the flowering world. Social butterflies, or duckbills. Fossil evidence, especially huge bone beds, suggests many hadrosaurs lived in massive herds, possibly migrating across landscapes following the seasonal growth of plants, much like wildebeest or bison do today. Safety in numbers against predators. The horned herd, Ceratopsians charge. While hadrosaurs mastered the grind, another group evolved impressive defensive and social weaponry, the Ceratopsians, led by the ultimate celebrity, Triceratops. Starting smaller in the early Cretaceous, Psittacosaurus, a dog-sized, parrot-beaked ancestor, they evolved into magnificent beasts. The frill and the horns. Their signature features were the unbony frill at the back of the skull and the facial horns. Triceratops took this to the extreme with 3 massive horns, 1 short horn on the nose, 2 up to 3 feet long over the eyes, and a huge, solid frill. What were they for? Defense 101. Primarily deterring predators, facing down a hungry T-Rex. Lower that massive head, point those 3-foot-long spears, and present a wall of bone. It was a formidable deterrent. Showmanship. The frills and horns were also likely billboards. Different shapes, sizes, and patterns probably helped individuals recognize their own species, show off their health and status to potential mates. Look at the size of my frill, or intimidate rivals during mating season. Think elk antlers, but on steroids and attached to a tank. The beak and the shears. Like hadrosaurs, ceratopsians had batteries of teeth, but arranged differently for slicing tough vegetation. Combined with a sharp, parrot-like beak for cropping plants, they were well equipped for the Cretaceous salad bar. They likely moved in herds too, adults forming protective circles around the young when threatened. Titanosaurs. The southern giants reach absurdity. While hadrosaurs and ceratopsians dominated the north, Laurasia, the southern continents, Gondwana, witnessed sauropods not just surviving, but reaching truly mind-melting proportions. Meet the Moditanosaurs. Size matters, but how? Patagoniton majorum, discovered in Argentina, is a prime contender for the largest land animal ever. Seriously, estimates suggest it stretched over 120 feet long, longer than a blue whale, and weighed a staggering 70 tons. That's equivalent to 10 large African elephants. Argentinosaurus, Dreadnoughtus, Puertosaurus. The names read like a roll call of heavyweight champions. How was this possible? They pushed the sauropod blueprint to its absolute limits. Air sacs on steroids. Their skeletal pneumaticity, air sacs invading bones, was extreme, making their colossal skeletons surprisingly lightweight for their volume. It was like building a skyscraper out of carbon fiber honeycombs instead of solid steel. Efficient eating machines. Their long necks allowed them to graze vast areas without moving much. They likely specialized in stripping the tops of tall trees, conifers and the new flowering giants in their habitats. The arms race factor. Here's a fascinating theory. Predator pressure. Gondwana had truly monstrous meat eaters. Giganotosaurus carolini, Argentina, was even longer and possibly heavier than T. Rex. Mapusaurus hunted in packs. Carcharodontosaurus, Africa, was another apex predator rivaling T-Rex in size. Facing predators this huge, the only defense for a sauropod was to get even huger. An adult Patagotitan was simply too big for even a Giganotosaurus to take down easily. This predator-prey arms race may have fueled the evolution of such insane sizes. The apex predator, Tyrannosaurus rex, hot-blooded monster king. And then, in the final act of the Cretaceous, North America got its own ultimate superstar, Tyrannosaurus rex. Steve Brusatta's description of it as a hot-blooded monster king is perfect. Forget the slow, tail-dragging lizard of old movies. Modern science paints a terrifyingly impressive picture. The bite that shook the world. Its bite force was legendary, estimated at a bone-crushing 8,000 to 12,000 pounds per square inch. That's more than 10 times the bite force of a lion. Its banana-sized teeth weren't just sharp. They were thick, designed for punching through bone and ripping flesh. It could shatter the frill of a Triceratops or the femur of an Edmontosaurus to get at the nutritious marrow inside. It was a walking industrial press. Senses on high alert. Huge eye sockets suggest excellent vision, possibly even binocular vision for judging distance accurately, crucial for a predator tackling large, dangerous prey. Large olfactory bulbs in its brain indicate a sense of smell powerful enough to detect carrion or prey over vast distances. It was a sensory powerhouse. Built for power, not pure speed. While likely faster than earlier portrayals, T-Rex wasn't a cheetah. Its massive leg muscles were built for power and endurance, not sprinting. It was probably an ambush predator or a powerful walker, jogger, relying on its immense strength and devastating bite to overwhelm prey. Think less sprinter, more unstoppable force. Hot-blooded hunter. Evidence strongly points to T-Rex being fully warm-blooded, endothermic. Fast growth rates. It could balloon from chick size to multi-tons in its teen years. Bone structure and likely insulating feathers, at least on parts of its body when young, all support this. It needed a high metabolism to fuel its enormous size and active predatory lifestyle. It wasn't a sluggish reptile. It was a dynamic, energetic predator. Brain power for a dinosaur. While not Einstein, T-Rex had a relatively large brain for a dinosaur, particularly the areas associated with smell and coordination. It was likely smarter than its prey and capable of complex hunting behaviors. While dinosaurs ruled the land, the Cretaceous seas were a realm of terrifyingly efficient predators, completely distinct from the dinosaurs but equally awe-inspiring. Remember those vast, warm, shallow seas? They were perfect for breeding marine giants. Mosasaurs, the Komodo dragons from hell. Imagine a monitor lizard, like a Komodo dragon, deciding to become fully aquatic, growing to the size of a bus and evolving flippers and a tail fin. That's a mosasaur, ranging from 10 feet to over 50 feet long. Mosasaurus hoffmannii. These were the apex predators of the late Cretaceous oceans. Their jaws were lined with sharp conical teeth, designed for grabbing slippery fish, ammonites, and even other marine reptiles. Some had flexible skulls, allowing them to swallow large prey whole. They propelled themselves through the water with powerful tail strokes, their flippers preventing steering. They were fast, powerful, and utterly formidable. Plesiosaurs came in two main flavors. Plesiosaurs. Think sea lion meets T-Rex. They had massive heads with enormous jaws filled with sharp teeth, short necks, and powerful flippers. Kronosaurus, Australia, and Liopleurodon, Europe, could reach 30 to 40 feet and were top predators, likely hunting large prey like ichthyosaurs and other plesiosaurs. Elasmosaurids. These were the ones with the ridiculously long necks, sometimes containing over 70 vertebrae. Elasmosaurus had a neck longer than its body and tail combined. They likely used these necks like snakes, darting their small heads quickly to snap up fish and squid while their large bodies floated stealthily below. Picture a floating periscope with jaws. Other denizens. The seas teemed with life. Giant marine turtles, archelon, filter-feeding fish larger than great white sharks, lead ichthyes, and diverse sharks patrolled the waters. Ammonites, spiral-shelled squid relatives, were incredibly diverse and abundant, their fossil shells now iconic symbols of the period. While much of the world was drifting apart, Australia and Antarctica remained connected throughout most of the Cretaceous. This vast polar continent had a unique ecosystem. Winters were cold and dark, with months of near darkness. Summers brought 24-hour sunlight. Dinosaurs here had to be tough. Fossils show a mix of familiar groups, smaller titanosaurs, relatives of iguanodon, small predators, and unique polar specialists. Some may have migrated, others might have hibernated, and many likely had insulating feathers or fuzz to survive the chilly winters. It was a world apart, a frozen snapshot of dinosaurian adaptability. The Cretaceous world was Earth at its most vibrant, diverse, and extreme. Flowering plants painted the continents. Dinosaurs reached unparalleled sizes and specializations, from the grinding herds of duckbills to the bone-crushing tyranny of Rex, to the absurdly colossal titanosaurs of the South. Oceans churned with nightmarish reptiles. It was a pinnacle of 180 million years of dinosaurian evolution, a seemingly unstoppable dynasty. But beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, forces were gathering. The Deccan traps in India were already rumbling, a slow-burning fuse of volcanic doom. And out in the cold dark of space, an unnoticed mountain of rock and metal was tracing a path that would intersect with this thriving world in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The stage, magnificent as it was being set for the final act. So, the Cretaceous world was buzzing, bursting, roaring. Dinosaurs, in all their magnificent, absurd glory, seemed untouchable. T-Rex ruled the forests, titanosaurs shook the southern continents, hadrosaurs mowed down meadows of flowers, oceans teemed with monsters. It was life at its most exuberant, its most dominant. But paradise, as it turns out, has a shelf life, and Earth's thermostat was already starting to flicker, thanks to a slow-burning nightmare happening half a world away. Imagine a headache that starts as a dull throb and just never stops. For thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. That was Earth, starting roughly 300,000 years before, the big cosmic finale. The culprit? A geological hotspot of unimaginable fury located under what is now India. This wasn't a single volcano. This was flood basalt volcanism. On a scale that makes human comprehension short-circuit, we call it the Teowa Deccan Traps. Trap comes from a Swedish word for staircase, describing the step-like layers of cooled lava. The scale is stupid. Picture lava not erupting from a neat cone, but gushing out of colossal continent-scale cracks in the Earth's crust. We're talking about lava flows so vast and numerous they built up layers over 2 kilometers thick. That's taller than 6 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. The area covered? Roughly half the size of India itself. Imagine the entire state of Texas buried under a mile-thick layer of molten rock. Repeatedly. For millennia. It was the planet bleeding out internally. The slow poison. This wasn't a quick explosion. It was a relentless, gushing wound. Lava surged forth in massive pulses, each pulse burying landscapes larger than countries under hundreds of feet of incandescent rock. Between pulses, toxic fumes. The Deccan Traps were pumping out unimaginable quantities of volcanic gases. Carbon dioxide, CO2. Think of it as turning Earth's thermostat to broil. CO2 is the ultimate greenhouse gas. All that erupting lava released trillions of tons of it. Global temperatures began a long, dangerous climb. Think summers feeling like Death Valley, everywhere. Oceans warmed, becoming sluggish and less able to hold oxygen. Sulfur dioxide, SO2, the nasty cousin. SO2 reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid. The skies wept acid rain, not gentle drizzle, but downpours as corrosive as vinegar, stripping leaves from trees, poisoning freshwater lakes and rivers, dissolving the shells of snails and clams, and leaching vital nutrients from the soil. Imagine the smell, a sharp, acrid tang constantly in the air. The stress test. Life under the Deccan Traps was like living next to a never-ending industrial accident. Ecosystems were stressed. Plants adapted to stable climates struggled. Animals sensitive to heat or acidification started to decline. Food chains became wobblier. The background extinction rate, the normal churn of species coming and going, began to tick upwards. It wasn't an apocalypse yet, but it was a planet running a persistent, debilitating fever. Dinosaurs, especially the giant specialists, were feeling the pressure. Their enormous bodies needed vast amounts of specific food, stable climates. The world was becoming less stable, less predictable. Think of it as the entire biosphere holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, 66 million years ago, on a day that probably dawned like any other, maybe a Triceratops was munching ferns, a T-Rex was sizing up its next meal, pterosaurs wheeled in the sky. The universe decided Earth needed a hard reboot. The other shoe wasn't just dropping, it was a steel-toed boot, the size of Mount Everest, dropped from orbit. The uninvited guest. Hurtling through the void, unnoticed, was a mountain of rock and metal. An asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers, 6 miles wide. To put that in perspective, taller than Mount Everest is high, and denser than you can imagine. But this wasn't just any old space rock. Cruelly, fatefully, it was composed of rock rich in sulfur, and heavy metals like iridium, a metal rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids. Its target? Not the open ocean, not a barren desert. It was aimed like a cosmic bullet at the cracker, Yucatan Peninsulas in Mexico, specifically at a geological formation rich in, you guessed it, limestone and sulfur deposits. From ancient ocean beds. Worst blind date ever. The whistling becomes a deafening scream. The subsonic rumble becomes an overwhelming physical force. Then, a sound effect that isn't really a sound. It's more the absence of sound, a pressure wave that feels like the universe imploding. Boom! The sound reverberates, echoes, distorts, lasting far too long before fading into a terrifying, high-pitched, ringing silence. Impact beyond human scale. The moment the asteroid hit, traveling at about 20 kilometers per second. That's 45,000 miles per hour. It released energy equivalent to billions of Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs, detonating at once, not millions. Billions. Let that sink in. In milliseconds. Ground zero annihilation. At the point of impact, everything, rock, water, dinosaurs, the very ocean floor, was instantly vaporized. Temperatures exceeded those on the surface of the sun. The asteroid itself punched through miles of rock and water like it was tissue paper. The Chicxulub crater. This cosmic punch left a scar, a crater, 110 miles, 180 kilometers wide, and 12 miles, 19 kilometers deep. Imagine a hole so vast you could fit the entire island of Hawaii inside it, and so deep that Mount Everest dropped into it would barely poke its head above the rim. The force was so immense it temporarily turned solid rock beneath it into a liquid, creating a transient crater, even wider, before it collapsed into its final form. Mega tsunamis. The impact happened partly in the shallow sea covering the Yucatan. The energy displaced trillions of tons of water. Within minutes, tsunamis taller than the Empire State Building, over 1,000 feet high in the Gulf of Mexico, radiated outwards. These weren't normal waves. They were moving walls of water traveling at jet speeds. They scoured coastlines thousands of miles away. Evidence of debris from these waves has been found in inland states like Arkansas and even Illinois. Global earthquakes, volcanic fury. The impact shock wave traveled through the entire planet like a bell being struck. It triggered global earthquakes, far stronger than anything recorded in human history. Think magnitude 12 or 13, shaking that would liquefy the ground and level mountains globally. This seismic hammer blow likely also intensified the eruptions already happening at the Deccan Traps and potentially triggered volcanic activity elsewhere. The immediate effects, the vaporization, the tsunamis, the earthquakes, were apocalyptic, but localized in geological terms. The true planet-wide killer was what the impact injected into the atmosphere. Remember that unlucky combination? A sulfur-rich asteroid hitting sulfur-rich limestone. The toxic sky shroud. The unimaginable heat of impact didn't just vaporize rock, it chemically altered it. Trillions of tons of vaporized rock, sulfur dioxide, SO2, water vapor, and soot from global wildfires ignited by the heat pulse and falling molten debris were blasted high into the stratosphere, the layer of atmosphere above where weather happens. This wasn't just dust that settles in a few weeks. This was a global toxic aerosol cloud. Nuclear winter without the nukes. This cloud was incredibly effective at two things. One, blocking sunlight. It acted like a planet-sized sunshade. Sunlight couldn't penetrate. Days became like twilight, then like deep dusk. Then for months, possibly years, it became perpetual night. Photosynthesis, the process plants use to turn sunlight into food, stopped, dead. It was an instant global crop failure on a scale that makes all human famines combined look like a picnic. 2. Plunging temperatures. With sunlight blocked, global average temperatures plummeted by as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 28 degrees Celsius, in a matter of weeks. Imagine going from a pleasant summer day to deep winter, globally, almost overnight. Snow fell in the tropics. Oceans began to freeze at the poles. It was a nuclear winter, triggered by a rock, not bombs. Acid rain on steroids. Remember the SO2? High in the atmosphere, it combined with water vapor to form sulfuric acid. This fell as acid rain of unprecedented ferocity and duration. It poisoned any remaining freshwater sources, killed surviving land plants, and poured into the oceans. Ocean apocalypse. The acid rain was just the start for the seas. The sudden darkness killed phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the entire marine food web. The drastic cooling shocked marine life. The acidification dissolved the calcium carbonate shells of plankton, mollusks, and ammonites. Combined with the Deccan Trap's earlier warming and the impact's own disruptions, the oceans became acidic, anoxic, low oxygen, and freezing in parts. Marine ecosystems collapsed like a house of cards. The magnificent mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and giant ammonites had nowhere to hide. They were starved, frozen, suffocated, and dissolved. The Great Starvation, a planet-wide food chain, collapse. The cascade of death was brutal and inescapable. 1. Plants wither. No sunlight, acid rain, freezing temperatures. Land plants, ferns, cycads, conifers, flowering plants died en masse. Vast forests became fields of rotting stalks. The lush Cretaceous world turned into a global wasteland dominated only by the hardiest ferns and fungi feeding on the dead. 2. Herbivores starve. Giant hadrosaurs needed truckloads of plants every day. Triceratops, herds needed vast pastures. Titanosaurs needed entire forests. With plants gone, they had nothing. They starved to death, their massive bodies collapsing where they stood. Smaller plant eaters fared little better. The specialized teeth of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians ground nothing but dust. 3. Carnivores follow. Tyrannosaurus rex, the hot-blooded monster king, needed the energy equivalent of a few humans per day to fuel its enormous body. With the hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and smaller herbivores dead or dying, the menu vanished. The giant predators starved. Scavengers had a brief, gruesome feast on the mountains of corpses, but soon even carrion ran out. 4. The creepy vitamin D killer. There's another insidious layer. That global shroud didn't just block visible sunlight, it filtered out UVB radiation. Why does that matter? UVB is crucial for most land animals, including dinosaurs, to produce vitamin D3 in their skin. Without vitamin D3, you can't properly absorb calcium. Without calcium, bones become weak and brittle. Eggshells become thin and fragile. Embryos inside can't develop properly. Imagine the last surviving dinosaurs, weakened by hunger and cold, finally laying clutches of eggs, only for the shells to be so thin they collapse or can't protect the developing young. No new generation. It was a silent, invisible poison finishing off survivors that had weathered the initial fire and ice. Why did some survive? The art of being small, burrowing, and unfussy. The non-avian dinosaurs, the T-Rex, Triceratops, sauropods, hadrosaurs, perished. So did pterosaurs, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ammonites, and countless others. But life didn't end. Who slipped through? Size matters. Small is beautiful. Large animals need vast amounts of food and stable environments. Small animals need less. A mouse needs crumbs. An elephant needs a forest. Location, location, location. Animals that lived in protected environments had a buffer. Burrowers, like many small mammals, could escape the searing heat pulse, the freezing surface cold, and the acid rain underground. Aquatic animals. Living in fresh water, like some turtles, crocodiles, amphibians, might be somewhat shielded from the immediate atmospheric chaos, though they still faced long-term food chain collapse and acidification. Deep ocean creatures. Living off chemical vents or detritus falling from above had a slower, more buffered change. Diet diversity. The gourmet versus the garbage disposal. Specialists died. Animals that could eat anything survived. Small mammals, many birds, lizards, frogs, and crocodiles are often generalists, or detritivores, eaters of dead stuff. Seeds, nuts, insects, worms, rotting plants, fungi, even carrion. If it was organic, they could probably eat it. They didn't rely on one specific food source that vanished. Metabolic flexibility. Cold-blooded animals, ectotherms, like crocodiles, lizards, snakes, and turtles, can slow their metabolism dramatically when food is scarce or temperatures drop. A crocodile can survive months without eating. A warm-blooded T-Rex would starve in weeks. Even some small mammals might have been able to enter torpor, a kind of short-term hibernation. The egg factor. Animals with protective parenting strategies or tougher eggs had an advantage. Crocodiles bury their eggs and guard nests. Many birds, the surviving dinosaurs, incubate eggs carefully. Small mammals often have protective pouches or nests. Thin, fragile dinosaur eggs, already weakened by lack of UVB, were incredibly vulnerable in the chaotic, dangerous post-impact world. The world after the impact was a hellscape. Soot-filled darkness for years. Global winter, acid rain, dead forests, empty oceans. The silence must have been deafening. No dinosaur calls, no buzzing of giant insects, just the howl of the wind over desolate landscapes. Ferns, those ancient survivors, were the first plants to carpet the scorched earth in vast, fern prairies. It took hundreds of thousands of years for the oceans to begin recovering. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, the shroud began to thin. Sunlight, weak at first, filtered back through. Temperatures crept upwards. And in the burrows, the ponds, the sheltered valleys, the survivors, the small, the tough, the adaptable, began to creep out. Mammals, no longer just janitors living in the shadows of giants, seized their chance. Birds, the feathered heirs of the dinosaurs, diversified wildly. The age of dinosaurs was over. The asteroid and the volcanoes had delivered the ultimate 1-2 punch, a cosmic-scale disaster that reset the course of life on Earth. The reign of the terrible lizards ended in fire, ice, darkness, and silence. But from the ashes, a new world, our world, would eventually emerge. Picture the scene. 66 million years ago, the dust is finally settling. Literally. After years of choking darkness, weak sunlight struggles through the thinning shroud of ash and sulfur. The world it reveals is broken, hauntingly silent. The thunderous footsteps, the bellowing calls of giants, the rustling of vast forests, all gone, replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by the sigh of the wind over landscapes carpeted not in green, but in a monotonous sea of tough ferns. These fern prairies are the ultimate survivors, the first responders to a global catastrophe, painting the scorched earth a dull, resilient green. the oceans once teeming, are ghostly quiet. It's a planet in intensive care, but life, stubborn and miraculous, was still whispering. Not in the grand halls of power anymore, but in the cracks, the burrows, the muddy edges. The survivors weren't the kings and queens. They were the janitors, the night shift workers, the generalists who knew how to make do. And now, the stage, vast, empty, and scarred, was finally theirs. For over 150 million years, mammals had lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs. Think of them as the furry interns of the Mesozoic era. Mostly small, shrew-sized, rat-sized, maybe badger-sized at best. They scurried in the undergrowth, active mainly at night, when the big, scary reptiles were less active. They nibbled insects, worms, seeds, maybe small lizards, and tried very hard not to get stepped on. They were the ultimate background characters. But the KPG extinction changed everything. Overnight, well, geologically speaking, the no vacancy sign on all the major ecological jobs came down. The top predator suites, vacant. The mega herbivore grazing licenses, available. The mid-sized browser positions, open for applications. Mammals didn't just seize the chance. They underwent an evolutionary explosion called the Cenozoic radiation. It was like winning the lottery and immediately investing in a massive expansion. Within 15 million years, and that's geologically blink and you miss it fast. Think about it. From creatures you could hold in your hand to beasts the size of rhinos in less time than it took for the Rocky Mountains to fully rise. How? With no giant reptiles dominating the landscapes, mammals could experiment with body sizes and lifestyles previously impossible. There was suddenly room to be big. Mammals had inherent advantages: warm blood for constant activity, live birth for protecting young, larger brains for problem solving, diverse teeth for eating almost anything. They were pre-adapted generalists, ready to specialize. These weren't your modern rhinos and hippos right away. The first giants were often bizarre experiments. Uintatherium. Appearing only about 5 million years after the extinction, this was a rhino-sized beast with 6 blunt horns on its head and massive saber-like canine teeth, despite probably being a plant eater. Think a grumpy, overgrown, horned tapir with identity issues, Arsinotherium. Imagine a rhino crossed with an elephant, sporting 2 enormous side-by-side horns on its nose. Another early giant herbivore exploring the big and weird aesthetic. Basilosaurus. Okay, this one went aquatic. Early whales like Basilosaurus were already stretching 50-60 feet long within 15 to 20 million years after the extinction, evolving from land-dwelling, wolf-like ancestors. Talk about a career change. Entelodonts, the Terminator pigs. While not the biggest, these appeared relatively early and were terrifying. Imagine a cow-sized, bison-built pig with massive bone-crushing jaws and a face only a mother could, well, maybe not even then. They were the apex predators and scavengers of their early Cenozoic world. This rapid diversification laid the groundwork for all modern mammal groups, the ancestors of horses, elephants, cats, dogs, deer, primates, bats, whales, you name it. They filled the forests, the plains, the rivers, and eventually the skies. The age of mammals had truly begun, rising literally from the ashes of the giants. But let's be absolutely clear. Not all dinosaurs died. One very special branch survived: the birds. When we say non-avian dinosaurs went extinct, we mean the T-Rex, Triceratops, sauropods, etc. But the feathered theropods, the ones experimenting with flight in the Jurassic trees, some of them made it through the darkness. They weren't majestic eagles yet. Think more like crows or ground-dwelling birds. Tough, intelligent, adaptable, and crucially, small. With the skies suddenly emptied of their main competitors, the pterosaurs, birds went absolutely wild. This was their great avian radiation. Within a few million years, they exploded into an astonishing variety of forms, filling niches faster than you can say feathered dinosaur. This included terror birds, Forus racids. In South America, isolated from placental mammals, birds decided to reclaim their predatory heritage. Terror birds like Kelenkin or Titanus stood up to 10 feet tall, with massive, axe-like beaks and powerful legs for running down prey. They were the top predators for millions of years. Penguins, taking the plunge into cold southern oceans, evolving flippers from wings and becoming master swimmers. Hummingbirds, miniaturizing to an incredible degree, evolving wings that beat faster than the eye can see, hovering like insects to sip nectar from the new flowers. Eagles, hawks, mastering the skies as apex aerial predators, eyesight sharper than any camera. Songbirds, evolving complex vocal cords, filling forests with intricate melodies for communication and courtship. Ostriches, emus, giving up flight for speed on the ground on open plains. Woodpeckers, kingfishers, parrots, ducks, vultures. The list is endless. Every shape, size, color, diet, and habitat was explored. Birds became the most diverse group of land vertebrates on the planet. That sparrow outside your window, the pigeon strutting on the sidewalk, the chicken on your plate. They are all dinosaur royalty, the direct descendants of theropods like Velociraptor. Their wishbone, a dinosaur heirloom. Their feathers, dinosaur technology. Their incredible lungs, a dinosaur superpower. They are the living dinosaurs. The plant world didn't stand still either. While ferns did the initial cleanup crew work, the angiosperms, the flowering plants, were poised for global domination. The KPG extinction removed their biggest obstacle, the giant herbivores. Sauropods stripping whole treetops, hadrosaurs mowing down vast fields of flowers, ceratopsians browsing shrubs down to nubs, gone. This was a botanical bonanza. Without constant, intense pressure from mega herbivores, flowering plants could grow taller, invest more energy in showy flowers and nutritious fruits, and spread their seeds more aggressively. They weren't constantly being munched into submission. The rise of mammals and birds created new partners. Small mammals scurried through undergrowth, distributing seeds in their droppings. Birds, especially fruit eaters, became long-distance seed dispersers, carrying seeds far and wide in their guts. Pollination by insects, birds, and even bats became more sophisticated and efficient than ever. Flowering plants exploded in diversity, creating the complex, multi-layered forests, grasslands, once grass finally evolved a bit later, and meadows we recognize today. They painted the world in vibrant, irresistible colors, yellows, reds, purples, blues, and filled the air with intoxicating scents. The planet went from the muted greens and browns of the Mesozoic to the technicolor world we know. So, did the dinosaurs fall? Absolutely. The magnificent dominant forms that ruled for 170 million years were extinguished in a geological instant. Their reign ended in fire, darkness, and a profound silence. But did they vanish? No. Their legacy is written in bone and feather, in the very air we breathe. Life is resilient, but fragile. The dinosaur story is the ultimate testament to life's tenacity. From the charred emptiness of the Permian, they rose. From the stress of the Deccan traps, they adapted. And even after the asteroid's knockout blow, life clawed its way back, through ferns, through tiny mammals, through crow-like birds. It finds a way, but it also shows how terrifyingly fragile that thread can be. Dominance is no shield against cosmic bad luck or planetary upheaval. A single bad day scaled up to planetary proportions can reset everything. The dinosaurs ruled for an almost unimaginable span of time, over 3 times longer than mammals have even existed so far. Yet their reign ended. Every dominant group eventually gives way. It's the rhythm of evolution and Earth's restless change. Sometimes it's not a slow decline, but a sudden, catastrophic event. A volcanic nightmare, a mountain falling from the sky. The universe operates on scales and timelines that can sweep away even the grandest empires of life in an instant. The fall of the dinosaurs wasn't just an end. It was a brutal, necessary clearing of the stage. It made our world possible. It allowed mammals to flourish, eventually leading to primates, and then to us. Curious, storytelling apes who dig up fossils, gaze at birds, and piece together this incredible saga. Without that asteroid, without that extinction, the Earth might still be ruled by descendants of T-Rex, and mammals might still be scurrying in the shadows. We owe our very existence to that cataclysm, so next time you hear a bird sing, pause. Watch a sparrow hop, an eagle soar, a chicken scratch the ground. Look at the wishbone on your Thanksgiving turkey. See the intricate structure of a feather. That's not just a bird. That is Tyrannosaurus rex's great-great-great, multiply by 1,000,000, grandniece. That is Velociraptor refined and perfected. That air in its bones, a sauropod's inheritance. That fierce glint in a hawk's eye, the predator spirit of its Jurassic ancestors. They carry the fire. They are the living proof that the dinosaurs didn't just vanish. They took flight. They are the dinosaur dynasty's final, most beautiful, and enduring masterpiece. Their encore is the song outside your window, the flash of color in the trees, the enduring miracle of life that soars above the earth, forever echoing the giants who once walked below.